So there is a possible route for transferring your H-1B to your own startup, but the reason why it's not very desirable for lots of people that I spend time with is because the H-1B has a prevailing wage requirement and it has a specific job classification.
Hello and welcome to Up to the Valley, where we explore the remarkable journeys of those who've embraced change and embarked on new adventure. I'm your host, Prateek Panda, passionate about uncovering stories of resilience and innovation. Today, we are honored to have Lisa Wehden on our podcast. She's the CEO and founder of Plymouth, a pioneering company revolutionizing immigration services in Silicon Valley. Her journey is a testament to perseverance and ingenuity, and her path to Silicon Valley began with a personal struggle navigating the complexities of US immigration. From overcoming visa challenges herself to founding Plymouth, she has empowered countless individuals and startups with faster, transparent immigration solutions. Her background as an investor at Bloomberg Beta and her advocacy for technology driven solutions in immigration underscore her commitment to innovation and community spirit. Lisa, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Wow, thank you so much for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here. Let's get started with a little bit about your background. Tell us where you grew up. What was your background? What got you to the US?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very small town in the north of England, the industrial heartland of Yorkshire. My parents were actually immigrants to the UK. So my mum left Algeria where there was a civil war and moved to the UK. And like many good immigrant mothers, she drilled into me education, education, education. And so I ended up getting into Oxford University. And when I got there, I was really curious about what I should do with my life, like as any good student. And whilst I was there, I ended up meeting a lot of incredibly talented individuals from different backgrounds because I got involved in this organization called the Oxford Union. And the Oxford Union hosts leaders from around the world. So, economists, politicians, titans of industry, fashion icons. And we also hosted technologists, so individuals from Silicon Valley. So we hosted Jack Dorsey, Brian Chesky, Eric Schmidt, and countless others. And I remember at the age of 19 or 20, like those are the people I want to be. Like they are changing the world. They're like fast, they're ambitious. They were building companies that I was using. Like it was just this energy that I felt was electric. And unlike my peers who ended up going into law, banking, consultancy, I, at that time, wanted to go into the tech industry. And that was what got me started around thinking like, oh, I have to be in America because America was and continues to be the leader in the technology industry.
Yep. And what was the first step that encouraged you to start, moving towards Silicon Valley physically as well?
Physically, yeah. So after I graduated, I tried to start a company. And this was like 2016 in the UK, trying to start a technology company. It was just not what graduates were doing. It was not the default career path. And I came to the US for a few months and met someone that I thought was like really great partner to work with, but I couldn't stay because of the visa. And so ended up leaving and realizing that I would need a work visa to stay in the US. And I essentially realized I needed to like build up my career and professional achievements to actually be able to apply to the US. And so I spent 2 years working on building entrepreneurial ecosystems in Europe. And after I did that, I was like able to go and pitch myself to people in America in Silicon Valley to give me a job. And that was like the beginning of my visa journey, like getting a job in the US and then being able to apply for a visa.
Do you mind me asking what visa you were on while you were working in the US?
So when I first moved officially to the United States, I was on a J1 visa. And the reason I was on a J1 is that the H1B lottery had passed. I wasn't considered eligible for an O1 visa. And I was only here temporarily for a 12-month period. And so it was a really great visa to apply for.
Okay. And, for a lot of our listeners, many founders or immigrant founders of startups who are in the US already usually are on one of the popular work visas, which is H-1B. And rarely do others know that on an H-1B, you can't start a company or you can't pay yourself. Well, you can start a company technically, but you can't pay yourself and you can't be fully employed. What is the best way for people like that to start figuring out how do they work full time for their own product?
So there is a possible route for transferring your H1B to your own startup. But the reason why it's not very desirable for lots of people that I spend time with is because the H1B has a prevailing wage requirement and there has a specific job classification. And so if you're a founder of a startup, it's very difficult to pay yourself the prevailing wage requirement because typically startup founders actually pay themselves a much lower salary. And it's hard to map someone's qualifications to the CEO criteria or the CTO qualifications. And so it's just not very well designed for startup founders. And the core insight at Plymouth is actually many more people are already eligible for the O1 visa pathway than they might realize. And the O1 is great because there's no minimum degree requirement, no minimum salary requirement. You can apply at any time in the year and you can get an answer within 15 business days if you pay for premium processing. And so if you're an entrepreneurial talent, it's just this really great visa that you could pursue. And I can kind of share why many more people are eligible for this visa pathway than they might previously realize, if that would be helpful too.
Yeah, I think we should because, I mean, in my personal experience, I've been on an O1. And in the beginning, I did not think O1 was an option for me because I thought it for like movie stars and research scholars, and you need to have a lot of papers to your name and whatnot. Although by that time I did had a startup that was doing decently well, but I still did not
Yeah.
think myself eligible for an O1. It was only accidentally that I found out and then eventually got an O1. So definitely tell us a little bit more about why you think a lot more people are eligible for an O1.
Well, congratulations. That's no easy feat. Always happy to hear someone getting their O1 approved. And yeah, there's this like total myth that you have to be a Nobel Prize winner to get an O1 visa, and that is not the case at all. There are 8 criteria, and you have to meet 3 out of the 8 criteria. A couple of the criteria that some people might already have, if they've played a critical role at a company which is very prominent, they could meet the criteria. And so if you're a critical software engineer, maybe you've been contributing code contributions. If you are a product manager, maybe you are leading the product roadmap. And so we can prove your criticality in that way. And then for the distinguished reputation piece, if you're a startup that's raised venture capital funding, maybe you've got a few press articles, maybe you have accepted in some accelerators, like we can prove that it's relatively distinguished to have a startup who goes through those like successful achievements. If you work for a larger company like, Meta or Stripe, for example, it's easier to prove that that company has a distinguished reputation. The other criteria is judging the work of others, and people can judge hackathons, they can evaluate pitch competitions, different examples to help you judge the work of others. If you've ever peer reviewed work, so if you're an academic, that can also count. So those are 2 criteria that might already be available to you. If you've worked internationally and you've been paid an American salary internationally, it's more likely than not that you have a high compensation compared to other people in that country. So, for example, if you've been working in the UK and you've been working for an American company, maybe you have a high salary compared to others. And I can also talk through some other examples if that would be helpful, but just wanted to give you some ideas around how people could already be eligible.
Yeah, that's amazing, Lisa. On that note, let's talk a little bit about Plymouth. And you started this company that helps people with their O1 visas. What was the reason for starting out this company? I'm guessing you've been through your share of visa struggles, but how did you think that this is what I want to do and build my business on?
So I tried to build a different business before Plymouth and realized I just wasn't as passionate. Like I couldn't wake up every single day and like, this is what I wanted to build. And I had written an essay on immigration, my own immigration journey back in 2021, and it got quite a lot of traction online. Like people were like, "Oh, I didn't know about this visa category that I want A." People reached out. I ended up having chat conversations, and I realized that there was like a really big problem to solve around people just understanding that this was possible. It was an education gap that I identified. I never thought it'd become my life's work. I just wanted to go out and do more education. Like I was excited about this, and it felt really rewarding to help people in this way. And basically, I left my job when I got my green card, and I like wanted to work on things that I really, really cared about. And immigration was one of those things I just really cared about. Um, and so I spent kind of 6 months exploring how I would solve this problem, and, I ended up meeting these 2 guys from the Institute for Progress, Alex Stapp and Caleb Watney, and they were like, "Look, we really want someone to work on high-skilled immigration." And so we ended up having this lunch for a couple of hours, and it turned into a bigger project. I wrote a one-pager on this, and it initially started as an educational project and then quickly became actually a company. So it was never intended to be like, "This is gonna be a company, this is gonna be a venture company." It was, like, much more organic than that. It was what was the problem I was trying to solve, and that's how I ended up solving it.
So, as a O1 recipient myself, I understand some of the complexities with the O1. So, it's very different compared to some of the other work visas, and it can be hard to sort of prove some of the requirements that are needed to get an O1. In terms of technology and differentiation, what does Plymouth do as a platform that is different from, let's say, if I choose to work with a traditional law firm versus coming to Plymouth, what's different?
We are significantly faster than a traditional provider. And so typical providers takes about 4 months to put together an O1 application. Our standard process is 4 weeks. The reason why we can be so quick is we leverage technology in every single part of our petition production process. And so we are building a first of its kind case management system that streamlines the data collection. We pull in as much internal documentation in the most seamless way about you as possible. So traditional providers will ask you for all this information that is already readily available. And we've built clever technology to do deep analysis on you and the companies that you've worked on online to make a much richer, much more precise data set around how we prove your extraordinary ability. And so we're able to leverage technology in this moment to make the process significantly faster. We do also utilize AI in our process. So we've utilized kind of research agents and things of that nature to make it much quicker. But we are a tech-enabled solution, and so you will always have an attorney who is reviewing and finalizing your petition, because we believe that's important to have top-tier legal advice too.
Mm. So I understand the part about the technology, which I think is amazing because I think if I recall my own application and I'm doing renewals now, and that is one of the most difficult or boring, mundane parts of the job to do is just keep looking for stuff about your own self and then send it to your attorney, right? What else do you do from a storytelling perspective? And the reason I asked this is one of the challenges I faced was I was a founder of a cybersecurity company, but I was also a marketer, so the head of marketing. And what I had to do was to prove my marketing expertise, which meant that a lot of times when I was judging competitions, for example, I was doing that as a founder, but it wasn't talking about my marketing skill. When I was talking about some of my marketing skills, which is around hosting events and going to conferences, speaking at conferences, I would be talking about security because, hey, I'm a marketer for a security company. I talk about security. So I remember that in my first petition, the adjudicator was fairly confused if I'm a security guy or a marketer. So I think a lot of it is left to interpretation, which means that how you say the story matters a lot more than anything else, perhaps. Is there something that Plymouth does with respect to articulation of these stories that can help candidates have better success rates with O1s?
Yeah. So we've built a very specific methodology in partnership with our experienced VP of Legal, who spent 10 years building O1 petitions to focus on conciseness and clear storytelling around technologists. And so we have teammates who have experience in venture capital. I come from a venture capital background. One of the key skills in venture capital is storytelling, helping founders tell their stories. And so we have built this unique methodology to help identify specifically the uniqueness around individuals' fields, your field of endeavor. And so when I'm hearing you saying like, hey, I've got these two like fields, like I'm a cybersecurity specialist, but I'm also an expert in marketing. I'm like, can we fuse this together? Maybe your expertise is technology marketing specialized in cybersecurity, or thinking through kind of how to make arguments that capture the entire essence of an individual. And so we have built a playbook around specific technology profiles to enable them to capture the uniqueness of individuals. And our methodology is focused on very much precision to the criteria so that an officer can just review the case very straightforwardly and say yes. And there's nothing left to confusion or chance. Like there's no jargon, because that's one of the things that I think a lot of cases face that don't go through our process is like very jargony petitions that are quite confusing for someone to read.
Okay, that's very, very interesting and definitely very helpful. Tell us a little bit about, you moved to the US when you were fairly young, for the lack of a better word, fairly inexperienced as a founder as well. It was your early journey.
Yeah.
But how did you start about building a network and a support system in the US?
It's a great question. So when I was trying to get a job in the US, I reached out to tons of people. Like I sent cold emails, I sent Twitter DMs, LinkedIn's. I reached out to my immediate network and I asked, could I get some connections? And the thing that I did that I think is really powerful is sharing like why you want to get to know someone and offering some insights or reflections on maybe something that they have published or what they're working on. So doing the work to say like, this is why I'm worth your time because I've researched you. I kind of understand what you're interested in and I'm interested in it too. And so I think it's like writing really good cold emails, explaining your background, explaining why you're interested in talking to them. And then coming here, when I like originally came here, I had like a couple of people that I knew, and I would host dinners, I would host events, I would bring my immediate community together. And I would say, like, you can bring plus ones, you can bring people together. And that's kind of how you can grow organically. Maybe you only know like a few people, but those few people might also know a few other people and they might know a few other people. And so I think starting with your kind of immediate network is really powerful and doing stuff that is like of value, like hosting like a dinner around something you're interested in. Like if you're interested in cybersecurity, like host a dinner in cybersecurity, like build a community around you. And I think the thing that I see sometimes, like when people are very new to Silicon Valley, is following trends, like following what other people are interested in. And if I could go back and tell something to my younger self, I'd be like, just figure out what you're interested in and do that because it's very easy to follow like hype cycles and trends. Like a couple of years ago, it was like crypto. Everyone was like obsessed with
Yeah.
crypto and like there's still like a crypto community and but it's like now AI is really cool. And I don't know, it's just like your life and your career. So
Yeah.
figure out what like makes you really excited and follow that because I think then you'll build a much more powerful community around you.
I think that's great advice. One thing I like to talk about with all my guests also is around what was happening with your mental health as leaving your home country and the environment that you've grown up in is difficult. Right? And you come to a new place, you experience new things. I remember my first night in San Francisco. I was mugged at night point, and it was very scary experience for me. And it took me a while, a few years actually, to be able to walk on the streets of San Francisco again. I lived in San Jose, and I used to always take an Uber to a conference or a meeting. And then once it's done, if I have to stay past 6 p.m., 7 p.m., I don't take the bus, I don't take a train. I get into an Uber right out of the building that I'm in and go straight home. Right. So it took me a while to get to a point where I would be comfortable walking again and so on. And these are some experiences that you tend to live with, both good and bad. What was going through your mental health journey as you build new relationships, new friends, new support ecosystem? Did you have difficult days of missing familiarity of home?
I'm so sorry that happened. It sounds like shocking. And yeah, just sounds like a crazy journey. I also got mugged in San Francisco, not a knife point,
Mm.
but like on my first 2 weeks, like I got my phone stolen and I was like, oh my God, I'm so
Oh
stressed.
my gosh. I'm sorry that happened.
But to answer your kind of immediate question, it's taken a long time to figure out like what my self-care routines are, like what helps me kind of become much like happier as a person and as a founder. So I do a lot of meditation, exercise, to manage some of the stresses that come along with like moving country, missing family. I think you're right. It's like a really intense experience. Like you go from one ecosystem, one culture, one community, and then you dive in and you don't have much of a foundation and you have to very quickly build up that foundation. I think this is something so powerful about immigrant entrepreneurs. They are inherently risk takers. Like they move from one country to another country, and it's just such a huge risk. And yeah, I think it takes some time to build a foundation of like really good friendships. They take time to build up relationships. I do think it's amazing about the Bay Area is that people are so open and welcoming.
Yeah.
And so you can make friends relatively quickly. But yeah, no, it took some time to figure out the self care routine. And I also got stuck in the United States whilst my visa was processing. So I didn't get to see family for 2 years. It was also during COVID. So it was like this kind of like insane period. And yeah, I just missed them so much. It was like really hard. And now I can go home and nice. Well, I think
That's good.
California is my home now, but it's tough.
But that tricky part with immigrants as well, right? Like the kind of statement that you just made, we have to remind ourselves also sometimes that this is home for us now,
Uh,
but part of us is also left behind and there's family somewhere else. So a lot of times we might take it for granted, but it's hard for us to also process internally that what is truly home, right? Like, is it just where you live? Is that home? Or, where your real friends are, your parents are, your siblings are, right? So I think that's also part of a tough journey for any immigrant for that matter.
it's so interesting because this year I've thought a lot about this idea of what home is. And I think I used to be a bit more rigid in my thinking. Like the UK was my home and I was in America temporarily. And now I think you kind of have to be a bit more, or at least for me, I have to be much more like flexible in my thinking. Like, this is my home. This is where I'm
Yeah.
building community. This is where I built life. And I see myself here for the foreseeable future. And I have to leave that kind of old notion of like that life that I had is not my future. And so it kind of takes some time to get out of that mindset. And now, yeah, I consider California home. It's just sometimes I get those slips where I'm like, oh no, like that was home once, but this is home now. And also, I'm trying to convince my family to spend more time in California because I think it's an amazing place.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the best to be for sure. And especially as an immigrant, I think it's one of the best to be. So to switch gears a little bit, I'll ask you a slightly more fun question. If you had the chance to take one person out to dinner, it could be anybody. Who do you think you would want to go out to dinner with and why?
That is an amazing question. Um, The one person I want to take out for dinner. I'm just gonna get his name pronunciation right. Like I could say a fun one. Like the fun person that I want to take out for dinner
Sure.
is an author called Murakami. You might have read some of his books, Norwegian Wood, Casper on the Shore. I just think one of the surprising things about building a company is how much I love reading fiction now. So like on the weekends, I love reading a piece of fiction because it takes my mind completely out of company building and I get to be immersed in a different world for an afternoon. And it really is just like an amazing distraction from like the tactical parts of company building. And so I've been reading a lot of fiction recently, and I think Murakami is just an incredible world builder. So I'd love to go for dinner. He also wrote a book on running, and so he is a long distance runner, and I also do long distance running. So I'd love to talk to him about running too.
That's amazing. It's interesting you said about fiction because for a long time as a founder, I read a lot of business books, mostly everything nonfiction. It's funny that you said that because I just am starting to get back into reading fiction. I read fiction as a kid, but as I grew up, I just not read fiction, and it made me realize that like it maybe I don't want to say it kills your creativity, but like fiction is what helps you think more wildly. And that's definitely helpful, irrespective of whether you're a founder or not, but definitely helpful if you're a founder as well.
Yeah, I think a lot about content and what I read. And I used to like read all these business books, and I still read business books. Like I think they're very helpful. Like sometimes I read blog posts, or yeah, I've just read High Growth Handbook and Scaling People. Like these like books are really amazing, but they're not fun books. Like it's not for entertainment. It's like more for
Yeah.
practical advice. And I realized, yeah, I wasn't reading books that brought me like a different type of joy. And I just find fiction one of the best ways to just like enjoy life. Like reading another person's idea of a fictional world is one of life's greatest pleasures, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So looking forward with Plymouth, at least over the next few years, what is your vision? What are you expecting to achieve? Can you share a little bit about what's ahead for you?
Yes, so we're celebrating our Plymouth 100. So we've achieved 115 approvals for
That's
immigrants,
amazing.
which is really exciting. And so we've been hosting dinners and events to celebrate this. We had a fireside chat with Patrick Collison, a fireside chat with Amjad Masad. We really love bringing our immigrant community together. We're hoping to 10 times the number of immigrants that we can help. So we'd love to get to 1,000 immigrants building in the United States in the next year. And the long term vision for Plymouth is to become the on ramp to the American dream. So we help immigrants navigate their entire journey in the US, from immigration to building community to other products that we can offer them, and really build out this community and network of individuals who are transforming America and accelerating technological progress.
That is amazing, Lisa. Congratulations on that achievement, and I wish Plymouth a lot of success. I'm going to send you names of a few more immigrant founders who would be great for your fireside chat. I don't know if you know about Gurnath Paul. He was founder of Teachable. Yeah, I'm happy to make an introduction. I think he's a great speaker as well. And he is also a tremendous supporter of O1s and other immigrant founders who need help with letters of support. So he'll be great for that. And I'm happy to do a warm intro if that's helpful to you. But overall, I mean, this was an amazing conversation. Is there something else you would like to tell our listeners who are immigrant founders as well? Some last pieces of advice?
Yeah, if you're navigating US immigration, you're very talented, please reach out to us. We're at www.plymouthstreet.com or at Plymouth Street on Twitter. I'm Lisa Wehden, and we'd love to help you. We've got over 20 resource guides that are completely free to help you navigate your US immigration. So don't be alone. We'd love to help you.
That is amazing. And I think it's the spirit of the community that takes you forward with this. I still remember the words that my CEO told me when I was going through my first one is just forget about the immigration work, do your job, well, and it'll happen. It is complex, but don't be overburdened by the complexity, right? And I think that's where people like you come in, who take off the complexity of this whole process. And thank you so much for doing this amazing work. So more immigrant founders can end up in the US and do a great job working towards their dreams. Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing your journey and for sharing so many interesting pieces of information that I'm sure is helpful for all of our listeners. Thank you again for taking
Great,
out time.
great chatting. Thank you so much.
And that wraps up today's episode. Before we sign off, I would like to thank you for your support and thanks for tuning in. If you loved today's episode, then don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Be kind, be happy, challenge the norm. I'll see you folks again for the next one.